Mae'n pleser I fod yma, da chi gyd y trafod y pwnc yma, da chi. Brand-funded content used to sit on the sidelines of the industry, but in the past few years, it's exploded into the mainstream. With broadcasters under increased pressure and budgets tighter than ever, brands have become a lifeline. And now we're seeing the next leap. Brands commissioning their own shows, speaking directly to consumers in ways that look and feel just like traditional mainstream television. For producers navigating this tough landscape, branded content isn't just a side hustle anymore. It's a powerful new funding model, full of opportunities and challenges for those willing to adapt. But what exactly is branded content, and how does it really work? What's different about collaborating with a brand versus a broadcaster? And crucially, how can you get a foot in the door of this growing part of the industry? To unpack all of this, we've brought together a brilliant panel of producers and brand experts, here to share their experiences, their lessons, and their do's and don'ts of working with brands. What we're going to do is we're going to have a brief introduction from each of our panelists, and they're each going to then show a clip that illustrates the work that they've done and talk to us about the do's and don'ts and what they learned along the way. On our panel, we have Helen Veale, Media Executive and Strategic Consultant. We have Christie Toal, Company Director of Crash Productions. We have Dominic de Terville, Brand Partnership Specialist and Digital Content Producer, and Toby Cameron, Founder and Senior Producer of On Par Productions. So Helen, tell us about the first clip that you'd like to show.
So my fancy new job title is slightly confusing. I used to be the creative director of an indie called Outline Productions. I ran that business for 25 years, and we were very much involved in lifestyle television, food, travel, homes, all sorts of lovely 8 o'clock shows, the sort of arena from which budget has been evaporating somewhat. So we made a series for BBC Two that was called Remarkable Places to Eat. It rated brilliantly, its repeats rated brilliantly, it really had an audience, but the BBC were withdrawing their funding from that middle range of lifestyle shows in order to invest in more drama and more reality. So we had a lovely project. We took it to Channel 4 with the very talented and charming commissioning editor, Kate Thomas, now Kate Devlin, who saw this project and thought, yeah, I could get behind that. Can you bring a brand to help with the costs? So we brought a brand, and we brought Remarkable Places to Eat to E4 and Channel 4. And that's my clip.
Great. Shall we have a look at that, please?
Food is one of the best things about visiting a new city. But how can you be sure that you find the real gems?
I'm a seasoned professional, and even for me, it's difficult to find amazing places to eat.
So I've asked 6 of Britain's most celebrated chefs and foodies
Let's go!
to open up their little black books and take me to their all-time favorite places to eat.
Welcome to Veale. We must have a taste of that. We must.
You're so excited!
I am.
So as you can see from the end little logo there, we brought that to Channel 4 E4 in partnership with an Italian beer band called Poretti.
And so what's different about making a show like this, making it with a brand for a broadcaster versus making a conventional commission show on a terrestrial channel?
As I just worked out when you asked me that question as a practice run, unusually, I've done that project 2 ways. I've done it directly for the BBC without a brand, and I did it for Channel 4 with a brand. And that meant I had 2 bosses. I had a commissioning editor to satisfy with every aspect of the project, its look, its feel, its stories, its content. But I also had a brand who were funding it 50%. And they had their own agenda about what they wanted from that show. They didn't just want to give me the money and go off and make a show for Channel 4. They gave me the money because I don't know how many of you are familiar with the beer. It's excellent, but it's a beer that prides itself on being a beer that works with food. And so our series, which was about going to extraordinary places and having great food and enjoying that moment, there was a good overlap with the brand, but they're a beer brand, and they wanted to see beer in the show. They can't have alcohol beer in the show. So we had an issue. What they wanted to get out of that show, it worked with their brand story. It was going to speak to people who were foodies, who would be interested in spending a little bit of money on a good quality beer that would work with food. So our audience and their consumers, there was going to be overlap. They were going to get out of the show a chance to have their brand in the idents in front of the show. And it's a brand that's a challenger brand in this market. We've heard of other Italian beer brands, maybe more than we've heard of that one. So they were going to get the bumpers. They were going to get that. Our audience was their kind of people. There was an opportunity possibly for product placement, but only with an alcohol-free beer, which they weren't able to produce in time. And they were also going to get some digital activations around the show, lovely content around food and drink, and just taking a moment to be with your friends and sharing that experience. That was absolutely the right brand story for them. And we could bring a little bit the awareness of the talent from our show into that context for them. We could bring really high quality visuals and really help them get their message out about what's unique about their product.
Because I think something that I've discovered from my work with brands, and it's really obvious, and you touched upon it, is you are essentially working to two bosses. And one of your jobs as the executive producer on that is to keep both parties happy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It is quite a full-time job keeping the brand happy. They do not just give you the money and go away until the show is on air. You have to work with them about all the creative choices that you make, but you also have to remember it is a product for television. The commissioning editor and the channel's decision is final. So you're sort of in the middle negotiating those things. And you also have to realize that brands have got a level of sophistication about their messaging and their audience and what's right for them and what's not right for them that really takes a whole extra level of thought and creativity. You've got to communicate to your TV team, who are used to doing it just for the broadcaster, that all these other things or different thought processes that you have to go through to help the brand, it's not just, oh, God, I've got to do that as well. You've got to help them understand that it's a partnership and that delivering a great show is an absolute given, but delivering a great show that assists the brand with the reason that they got on board with you in the first place, that's when it works. But it is quite a full-time job managing that relationship. And sometimes brands are working with you at arm's length through an agency, through an advertising agency, through a marketing agency, through their digital communications agency. So you can end up in long Zooms with thousands of people, and the TV producer in you just goes, oh, please, can we cut to the chase and get on with it? But you just have to remember that they are very, very sophisticated in the way that they understand their brand, and it takes time and thought to make that relationship work.
We'll move on. Thank you. So Christie Toal from Crash Productions, you work primarily in digital. So what clip have you brought? And tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure, I can tell you a little bit about it. So I'm Christie from Crash. Basically, I'm from a TV background, but a few years ago, I decided to set up a digital-first production company. I could kind of see where the industry was moving. And essentially, a lot of my early work started with partnering and working with content creators and helping them elevate their content. So we did essentially a go-kart racing show called Misdriven, which was also voiced by Alex Jacks, who's the Formula One commentator for Channel 4. That format was really successful, and off the back of that, we then built into doing branded work, which cues up this clip. So essentially, I got approached by JD Sports to do a big kind of challenge video with a YouTube collective called the Beta Squad, who have a very large following in a nutshell.
Great, should we have a look?
Oh my God. We're about to go head-to-head in 4 different challenges to win as many boxes as possible. But there is a twist, of course there is. We aren't playing for ourselves, we are playing on behalf of 2 lucky JD Sports customers!
Where are they?
No, that means that we don't win the stuff.
So do I not win
nothing.
anything today?
So if they get batteries, I can't get like one.
Not one of them. But anyway, guys, here's how it works.
That's brilliant. So we just heard from Helen about what it's like working with brands for a linear broadcaster. Tell us what it's like working with them for a digital platform.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I came from traditional TV, but now very much digitally focused. And I think my approach to working with brands has very much grown through content creative relationships and building a kind of trusted relationship there. So our show Misdriven, for example, they kind of got us, we gelled, like we built a successful format, we kind of proved ourselves. And from building those relationships with creators, brands have come, well, we want to feature the Sidemen or Beta Squad, or we want to grow them on our channel and invest money into commissioning shows on to grow our culture and our audience around the JD brand. So now basically from that, I literally got an email into my email box saying, oh, we've seen your other shows, we're interested in you developing some ideas for us, like essentially, could you put together this production? This is our rough idea, we want to do a mystery box challenge, can you make it happen? I took a deep breath and I said, yeah, okay then.
And that came from JD Sports?
Yeah, that came from JD Direct, yeah.
Amazing. And so then within that you had the content creators, who were obviously the stars of the show. How was it working with them on the digital and on a branded piece of entertainment?
I think this is a really interesting conversation and somewhere where the industry is moving a bit with working with content creators, particularly the ones who have a bigger platform. They have a creative opinion as well. So I know Helen talked about having 2 bosses. Sometimes with content creators, it feels like having 3 bosses because it's like you've got to keep the brand happy. You know, whoever's looking after the channel, you know, and in branded, and I'm sure Helen and the rest of the panel will speak about this, brand protection is everything. How their brand is presented in your content is like kind of sacrosanct. But at the same time, the creators also have an opinion on every scene you shoot, what they're saying, how they're going to do it, because they're creatives and they may have started shooting content on their phone in their bedroom, but they've grown a channel that now has like 10 million views per video, so they also are brilliant creatives. And so part of the challenge, I think, for producers like myself is navigating between creators, the brand, but also bringing your own vision to life as well.
Great, thank you. We're going to come back to you all, but I want to keep it moving. So Dominic de Terville, brand specialist. You've worked with a lot of brands. What clip is it that you want to show us?
So this is a clip of a photography series that we made for Sky Arts. I think it's a really good example because it's an example of something not on a mainstream entertainment channel. So it sort of demonstrates that these sorts of partnerships can work on more specialist channels as well. It was a 6-part photography series called My Greatest Shot with 12 photographers unpacking the stories behind their career-defining or iconic shots. And it was funded by Adobe.
Thank you.
Food has a reputation as being probably one of the hardest things to photograph.
I do have fights with myself. I'm like, does it look nice? Does this even look like a tomato anymore?
It became more than just pet photography. I was creating these special, everlasting memories.
I believe that great stories take time.
Just a dream come true. It was almost a sort of pinnacle in a way, and I'm not really sure quite how I'm going to follow it.
So Adobe are a huge company. What was it like working with them, and what did they want out of this relationship?
So Adobe are the biggest creative software company in the world, and this was the first time that they'd done something like this. But the good thing about Adobe was, as Helen was saying, they have so much knowledge of what their brand is all about, who their audience are. Multiple several 100-page documents that detail all of this information, and a really clear understanding of what the levers are that they need to move to shift the dial to make something like this interesting for them. So this was all about a product they have called Photoshop Lightroom, which is their photography editing software. And they were trying to drive awareness of it, trying to drive comprehension of it in terms of how it works and how easy it is to use, and to drive favorability for the product, to get people to use it and recommend it. And I think what was great about working with Adobe was the sort of building of trust, and that trust enabling us to have quite a bit of editorial freedom. Of course, they wanted to make sure that everything aligned with their values and their sort of core proposition. But I think the fact that we understood how this could play within their broader brand platform, which is Creativity for All, which is a bit of their mission as well, and also the campaign that they were running for Lightroom, which was Your Shot, Your Story, it meant that we could work with them before we even got into pre-production to understand everything that they needed to make this really effective for them. So all of the usual things that you would be familiar with that you might get with a branded entertainment series, such as the sponsorship branding around the show, all of those things were a given, but we worked with them on how we would naturally integrate their product in the show. Obviously, for a photography series, if your product is post-production software, it's a very natural part of the storytelling as to how you go from concept to the amazing image at the end. But knowing that they wanted to grow awareness meant that we also made a 30-second TV commercial for them from the production infrastructure. We worked with Sky and their social team to build a whole community campaign to get people to share their shots and the story behind them as well. So sort of feeding into that community piece. And then we also developed some companion content for them, which was kind of masterclasses with 6 of the featured photographers talking more specifically about how they use Lightroom. And that sat outside of the program. Again, from a compliance perspective, as Helen was talking about, there's more that you can do if you're creating additional content from the same production infrastructure, but that sits on adobe.com or on their socials or elsewhere. So I think the trust that they had in us meant that it was a really effective relationship.
Because I think as a brand specialist yourself, somebody who's worked with loads and loads of brands who've put these partnerships together, for our audience, who I assume predominantly TV producers who are looking maybe to get into this or who are already into it, what are the brands looking for from us as producers? What are the sort of the characteristics? What do we need to understand about them that will help us be successful?
Yeah, I think I think they're looking for you to demonstrate that you see this as a partnership and that you don't see their money as a grant, that you're interested in understanding what their objectives are, and then using everything that you have to offer to try and help deliver those objectives through the program that you're working with them to partner and finance. So I think it's just demonstrating that understanding and that interest in their business. You know, and I've worked with lots of production companies who kind of find it a nuisance and difficult, and of course it is difficult, but I think if you portray the fact that you find them an imposition, then it's not really going to work out particularly well, or if it does, it's not really going to be repeatable.
Yeah, which kind of speaks to what Helen was saying about the producers going, duh, you know, we've got to listen to what these brands want to say. We need to buy in. We need to engage with what they're about.
And if you listen to what they say, these people are really super smart and they absolutely understand who their market is. They understand the story of their brand. It's really helpful. And they just know their business. So I felt we had a lot to learn, and it was a fruitful partnership as a result.
Toby, I want to come to you next. So Toby Cameron, On Par. You've worked with brands in a commercial world, and now that's evolved into linear content. Would you like to introduce your clip?
Yes, thank you. So our clip, we've been working with Green Man Festival for over 10 years. We've been creating content, advertising content for them, but also creating sessions, live sessions for their YouTube channel, so building up their audience. They're a festival that sells out every year, you know, 25,000 people. They always have big demand for tickets, but it's not like they've got an audience of millions and millions and millions, so they just need to keep reminding their audience that they're there and they've got this content there to sort of remind them of the brand. But what it's enabled us to do is build up a relationship with them, build up some trust, so we've been able to go and pitch a programme idea around Green Man Festival to BBC Wales, which we did this summer. But what I'm going to show you is a clip from one of the live sessions, a secret gig from Griff Rhys at Green Man Festival that has been broadcast recently on Green Man's YouTube channel.
Great. So then, as a producer, I know it's a relationship that's gone on for many years. How have you managed that relationship with Green Man, and how has that relationship blossomed?
I think with all clients, be it TV channels or commercial clients, it's about trust, isn't it? So it's like once you've been working with people and they understand, they can see that they can trust you, that you understand the brand, you understand what they're trying to achieve, you understand their audience and what their targets are, then it becomes easier to, you know, grow that relationship and look in other ways that you can take advantage of it. So when we had an opportunity to pitch it as a TV programme to BBC Wales, they felt very comfortable with that, and that you know, meant that it made it for an easier process, basically.
Okay, cool. So I think I often sit in these sessions and I'm sort of thinking, yeah, that's all really good. You people on the stage, you know, you're already doing it and that's going really well for you. But how do I get into what you're doing? Or, you know, what are the tips for those of us who haven't quite made that breakthrough? And, you know, how would we go about emulating the success that you guys are clearly enjoying? And so I think what would be really helpful is if I sort of went through each of you and you talked about, you know, partly the finance, let's be honest, you know, we need the money there. How did that finance come about? Who finds it? How does it compare to other content on that platform? And, you know, what should people out here who are hoping to do the same, how could they go about, hopefully, achieving similar success? So, Helen, if I come to you first, with yours, obviously you'd already made it for the BBC, but now suddenly you needed to bring a brand on board. What were the steps that you went through?
Once we'd got Channel 4's buy-in, I work with a man who's a specialist in finding brand partnerships, and it took a while. It took, 6, 7, 8 months. The channel were very patient because they realized these things don't happen overnight, and he found the Poretti brand for us, and it worked. It was a good fit from that point of view, but they were coming up with half of the money, and therefore they did feel that they needed to make sure they got value for that money, both in terms of having their say in the content and in terms of the sorts of digital extras that we were delivering for them to really activate their brand outside of the partnership and on their own social channels. So yeah, I work with a professional. If only I'd known Dominic, who's your ultimate brand finder creative, but I work with somebody who's extremely good and a sort of pretty unique specialist in the area.
And so what, you'll come up with the idea first and go to them, or you'll go to the broadcaster first, get the buy-in, or what's the sort of steps?
Buy-in from broadcaster is important because brands are not a cash machine. You don't just sort of shove your card in and they spit out the money. It's quite, you need to find a brand that's the right fit, and it needs to be at the time when they have got marketing spend. And so you have to have a lot of conversations before you find somebody who will fund something, and therefore the channels are very good at understanding we'll like this, but it will be parked on our slate for quite a while you go off and do the complicated process of getting that brand on board. And the brands take a rational choice about it. They look at the slot that you're going to be in. They can see the data about how many viewers are going to come to that slot and how many repeats you're going to get and what time and what channel. So there's an overall number of eyeballs that they are going to get by being your brand partner on TV. And that's got a value that can be calculated according to the sort of commercial rates around adverts for that slot. So there's always got to be a match between how much money you need and the value that the brand is going to get for that. And like you said, it's not a grant. They don't think, well, that's a nice program. Here is a ridiculous bag of money. They're making a strategic choice, and they need to be sure that they're going to get the level of engagement for their brand story by being your partner.
Christie, I'm going to come back to you in a second, but first of all, I want to go to Dominic, just because Helen's cued him up so well. So Dominic, tell us about what you do and how the kind of stuff that you do might be relevant to producers out there hoping to emulate Helen's journey.
Yeah, so part of what I do as a consultant now is find brand partners for TV shows, digital content, podcasts for production companies. With Adobe, I was in-house at Zinc at the time, so that was my remit anyway, to go and find them as a partner. But I also do that now for other production companies. And just to Helen's point, in terms of kind of order of process, it really is important that if we're talking about a broadcast show, that you do get that buy-in before you start talking to brands. I won't say which broadcaster, but at the start of this year, I spent 6 months bringing 4 brands to a TV show, only to be told by the broadcaster after all of that they didn't want the show anymore. So there's a huge amount of time that you can waste, and it's really important that if it's for broadcast, that you do have that buy-in from commissioning, scheduling, channel head if necessary, before you start engaging with brands. If it's digital or podcasts, it can be quicker because there's fewer stakeholders and less of a kind of commissioning process. But you still need to be able to help brands understand, even if it's a digital show, where it might live and how many people might see it. Because as Helen says, they do evaluate things through the metrics of how many people will see this versus how many pounds I'm putting into it. So it's an important part of it.
And just, to sort of spell it out, essentially, you're looking at the similar kind of tariff to what the tariff would be for that slot normally on a broadcast channel, or is it more, or is it less, or where would it normally sit?
For brands, I guess there's sort of 2 things, really. One is they will look at the audience delivery and the value of that audience, and they will generally equate that in sort of advertising terms, like what the advertising value of that is in terms of their sponsorship bumpers and what have you. And I think if you're taking an existing idea out to a brand that needs deficit funding or full funding, they'll tend to look at it that way. And it's not that far from tariff, but it just really depends on kind of audience size. If you're developing something bespoke to a brand's requirements, then the budgets can be higher as well. I mean, something like sort of the Adobe show, they ended up spending kind of high 6 figures on that partnership in total, because we also then did a deal to distribute it through BBC World News and extend the reach into other markets. So it does vary, but I think as a guide, it's probably in the ballpark of what the tariff would be for a particular slot.
And Christie, you were telling us, yours was an email that just arrived in your inbox from JD Sports. So I mean, that's the gift that everybody wants to receive in their inbox, isn't it? But from that point on, how did sort of putting that deal together manifest itself?
Yeah, I think a point I was going to make is just watching all of our VTs, what I notice is we're all working in the branded space, but we're doing such different things, which I think is really interesting. And it shows there's not one route into this as well. For me, for what I really am trying to focus with Crash is developing a tone of voice and developing an audience that we're trying to reach. So I often describe us as, those annoying kids that vape on the corner of your street. That's my audience. That's who I'm trying to kind of reach. And I want to work with the brands who want to reach that audience as well. So, I've tried hard to cultivate that voice, and therefore the brands kind of understand the kind of content that I'm trying to create, and it's a two-way street. Like, they want to find a production partner that gets them and gets their audience and what they're trying to do as well. So it's kind of, don't just think about it as, I've got a great idea, I need to find a brand to come into that. Think about it as, which are the brands that would really gel with me as a producer, and how can we grow stuff together?
Yeah, can I just add?
Go for it.
And I think that's kind of how I'm coming at it, is that often I'm having a commercial client and saying, well, how can I take advantage of this relationship that I've got access to, and then maybe take that to a broadcaster as well. But equally, when it is on the other way, which I've been having a lot more recently, is when you have an idea, you go to a channel and they're like, oh, can you go get a brand on board? It does make it much easier to open those doors in that capacity.
I think in terms of development, you've just got to be realistic about what's on your slate. I'm the sort of trad TV member of the gang, really, I suppose. Think about what's on your slate. You may have a documentary about a really dark current affairs topic or a true crime that you're really passionate about making. There's very unlikely going to be a brand that wants to be associated with really dark, true crime content. So if developing your business in the direction of branded entertainment, you need to start thinking with a strategic eye about what you're developing and what's on the slate, because some projects just will not fly in a branded space and others of them will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, recognizing how tonally your program needs to absolutely sit within those brand values is crucial. And that comes down to sort of the style of shooting, the narrative, and the talent. We're doing a thing at the moment with Lidl for Channel 4, Batch from Scratch is the second series, and it's presented by Joe Swash. Now, Joe Swash sits perfectly in that Lidl sort of area. You go into Little with Joe Swash, is absolutely mobbed. And then his co-presenter is Suzanne Mulhern, the batch lady, and she built a bit of a reputation for herself coming up with batch cooking techniques on Instagram. And so she was the sort of perfect fit for people who would normally shop in Lidl, who want to get the most for their money, most for their time, and she was, ideal for that. And I'd like to think that is where the brand and the program synergy works so well.
There can be some complexities around talent, because just because a brand has funded your program and funded your talent's performance within that program, they haven't bought your talent as a brand ambassador. So there's a lot of careful negotiating about, outside of the performance within the show, how much is that talent comfortable to do? Even things like, how many posts will they share? How many retweets will they do for the brand? And you just need to be aware that the brand can sometimes think, I've paid for this and I'll get everything that I want. And the talent might think, they paid me to do my job in the TV show, and for all the rest of it, talk to my agent. And I think that's a legitimate position for talent to take, but it's really good to flush out right at the beginning of the conversation what expectations the brand might have about the talent's involvement. So if you need to let them down, you can let them down gently at the beginning, or if you do need to negotiate with the agent and talk about fees for other elements, then you can do that in a timely way, and it feels like you're being cooperative and delivering.
Now, Toby, you wanted to talk a little bit about audience and how your work taps into that, and how you've been doing a project around that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. We were lucky enough to win a Innovate R&D grant last year, looking into young audiences. I sort of noticed that the young people that I knew weren't watching linear TV, so I was really interested to see what they were doing and what they were watching. And, they aren't not watching telly, but they're predominantly watching TikTok and YouTube. So that has really sort of informed the way that we're sort of developing content. And it means when we're going to commercial clients or when we're going to broadcast clients, especially focused on content for 16 to 24-year-olds, we can sort of develop ideas based around like using those insights. And I think specifically looking at the branded space is that 16 to 24-year-olds don't really care about branded content, as in they're happy to watch it. I think JD is like almost like the perfect example of it. Like it's huge, that channel, and that's their audience, but they're not going, oh, it's an advertisement, I don't want to watch it. And to be honest, they'd rather watch that than watch an advert. Adverts, annoyingly, I do also make ads. So like they're like, well, we just want to skip them, and I think ads do something different. But I think that's what digital specifically allows, is for brands to make content and advertise, but in a not obvious way to people. And I think specifically young audiences are just used to it, and they just want good content, and they don't really mind about that. We're just about to expand the studies to look into like a much wider audience. So I'm really interested to find out as we go to older audiences, do they not care? But I think you guys are speaking of great examples where not, like the Little Idea and Adobe and Peroni, where I think specifically on linear TV, people are used to it. Sorry.
Don't flag up the rival.
Yeah.
I'll get in trouble.
But we're getting more and more used to it. And I think your point as well, when I started off, 15 years ago, it was like, oh, do I want to do branded content? And it's like, well, actually, if it means that I can make stuff and the audiences are happy and it's getting watched, then, why not?
Well, it does feel like product placement, we're becoming a lot more comfortable with it, doesn't it? And it feels like the broadcasters are as well. There are rules and regulations around that, but actually we're far more familiar with seeing those brands on screen. I'm going to come to you, Dominic, just because I interrupted you, then I'll come to you, Helen.
Well, I was going to say, because if you execute product placement in the right way, there can't be any issue with it, because you do it with you do it with kind of credibility and authority about how you do it, so it doesn't feel like you're shoehorning a product into something. The interesting thing about what JD does is it's entertainment for that audience first and foremost. It's a very consumer-focused approach to making content, rather than thinking about how can I get JD in all over the place. And I think that there shouldn't be any issue. I think actually there's probably a little bit too much restriction in terms of how we approach product integration with commercial broadcasters. There's obviously much more flexibility on digital platforms and on streaming platforms, where you can have a show on Amazon, a bit like your show, Helen, but funded by Birra Moretti, where their beer is in it, and it isn't 0%. But it still needs to be done in a way that feels natural for audiences, because if you see it there, awareness doesn't equal favourability. So the onus is on us to convince brands to do it in the right way, so that it feels natural.
Helen?
Yeah, that was a very interesting moment when that hit at around about the same time as my show, because I was working under the Ofcom regulations, where you're still governed by the same undue prominence rules, even if you have a brand. So you can really show a big close-up of the brand and name check it like 1 time, 2 times, and the rest of the product placement or brand activation in the show has to be more subtle, but you are still governed by the same Ofcom rules, which was quite it can be a challenging conversation when a brand can see similar content on a different platform where the rules are completely different. But I still think that terrestrial television or mainstream television is a fantastic shop window for brands. The digital future is coming, but the TV present is still incredibly valuable for brands, a very powerful way of telling brand stories and increasing that favourable association. So you do have to work within those traditional rules, but you can still deliver.
And presumably, Christie, you didn't have any issues with product placement because it was their channel, it was their programme, they could put their JD branding in as much as they wanted?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, following Dominic's point, which is, with the JD stuff that we've done, they were very light touch about branding. And I think, because I've kind of sat in linear before, it was all about product placement. You can't have too much of the product, and it needs to be all about editorial. Brands have almost discovered that and being masters of their own storytelling. They're growing their own channels. They're working with creators directly. And they're going, we just want young people to come to our content and watch really cool stuff. And we want to be like culturally relevant, and that matters more to them than just plugging their product in the video. So what was interesting, like the practical thing was, like, we looked to the shots, there's not too much branding in that, was actually conversations we were having, was like, nah, that looks cool, let's roll with that.
Whereas Toby, your content is the brand, really. I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think that's what I'm really interested in, is like, once you've built that trust with that brand or that organization or whomever, and how can you increase the relationship and create other pieces of content for them. So that's kind of what I'm starting to look at doing, is like, okay, can we come in and can we make you an ad, or can we then come in and help you create a YouTube channel, or is there an opportunity for us to, is there some access that we can use to maybe pitch a TV program, or actually can we come up with a format or something that works that you could fund on a TV channel? And I think that's the main thing. It's getting in that window, it's getting through that door, and once you've built up that relationship with someone, how can you know the brand, they trust you, how can you sort of build on that relationship and just make more content with them?
So we've got 1 minute left. So if there was one piece of advice that each of you could give to our audience here who are hoping to get into brand TV, or who are already working in it and want to do more of it, what would that piece of advice be? And I'll start with you, Toby.
Just audiences. Who's the audience? Where are they? And, what do they want to see, basically?
Dominic?
I'd say think about everything that you can offer to brands. I think some of the things that you might not think are particularly valuable in terms of your wider resources, the production infrastructure, actually can really deliver extra benefit for them. So there's kind of more value than you can offer than sometimes I think producers realise.
I would say show that you understand the brand, show that you understand their tone of voice, and show them what you can deliver.
And Helen?
I'm boring and repetitive. The brand is not a cash machine. They have their own very sophisticated messaging and story, and learn from them, because that's how you'll make the partnership work.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you very much, Toby, Dominic, Christie and Helen. Thank you very much to the Veale Screen Summit for having us. Thank you very much to you all. Diolch yn fawr iawn.